always want to get this man's take on anything that goes down in the National Football League, certainly from front office rostering and trade deadlines. Longtime executive in this league, president and general manager of multiple teams, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Banner back on the program. Good to see you, Joe. How are you, sir? Joe?
I'm great. I always love being on with you guys, so appreciate the chance.
Absolutely, and appreciate you taking time to do this. All right, Joe, what did you make of the Jets' day the other day and what Darren Muji did by taking two of his best young players under long-term contracts and Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams and sending them to the Colts and Dallas Cowboys, respectively? Joe, what'd you think of that?
The good news is I don't see the Jets do anything where I don't immediately think of you. So
I appreciate that. So you were looking out for my text, huh? And when it came in, you're like, okay, I saw that coming. I like it. You are a keen, astute observer. That was already established. But what'd you think of the trade?
Well, let me give you a little background on why I look at it, and then I'll give you the answer.
Sure.
When I was at the Eagles, Andy Reid came on. We had spent a lot of time, I think you know by now, I tend to do a lot of research wherever I am,
yes,
on what had led to really successful turnarounds. Like what was the real history, not what it seemed like, not what people were telling us, what was the real history. And it led us to do something I think not everybody was doing. We sat down with the roster, we watched a bunch of tape together and individually, and then we said, how many players do we have on this roster right now that could start on a team 2 or 3 years from now that has a chance to be really good? And that's kind of the base from which we're going to build. They're sort of untouchable, even though they weren't all good players. So that first year, we came up with a number 9. We were just looking at starters. So of 22 starters, we had 9 players that we thought were young enough and good enough that they could be on the roster 2 to 3 years from now when we thought we'd be getting good. And therefore, they were very valuable to us, because if you're trying to replace 22 players, I don't know if you can even do it. Your hit rate on the assets you have, which is really just cap room and picks, has to be so high, it's almost impossible to do. And the other thing was relevant. We did a round-by-round analysis of success rate. Now, that's kind of subjective, because you can define success rate as anything, starting for 2 years, making a pro, whatever you want. So that's a little more subjective, but that was what we did. First-round picks through the round, about 50% end up being at least a quality starter for at least 2 years. Second round goes down to 40, and by the time you get to the fifth round, you're around like 5 and 10% all the way to the 7th round. So that was trying to value, like what was the player worth, what were the draft picks worth if we got them, and so on and so forth. So we had 9 out of 22. We won 5 games Andy's first year. We won 10 games his second year, won a playoff game, and went to the championship game in his third year. So I hear some people talking about, well, they weren't winning with this guy anyway. Big deal. Let's get rid of him. That's a big mistake, in my opinion. You have to, if we had to find 9 more players to start, the chance that we would have made the playoffs in year 2 have been really good by year 3. Put it out at least a year or 2, in my opinion. And I'm not even sure you can get there, because you just don't have that many assets. Now, I know you're acquiring some more assets, and that's good. It gives you a shot. So my reaction was they added enough assets between the 2 major trades the Jets did that it should be 4 picks that turn into 2 quality starters. For that, they traded 2 established quality players, in my opinion. So, and I don't know, I think they've pushed themselves well below this 9 number, which we were able to recover from in 2 years to try to rebuild from. So I do think they got fair value for what they traded. And I do understand when you're rebuilding, the impulse to think we get a lot more assets, that's either cap room or draft picks, that can help us. But I would have been really hesitant to trade players that would say under 28 years old in return for draft picks that I may or may not hit on. Forget the Jets' history. That's just league-wide. And I think we should assume, give them the benefit of the doubt, it's a new group. Let's assume they're going to at least hit league-wide averages. They're still only going to get 2 players out of those picks that they got. And they traded 2 players to get those probable 2 picks. Maybe they can overachieve, maybe they can underachieve. But that would have caused me, if I was sitting in that seat to make a decision, to be really hesitant to trade 2 players of that caliber at this point.
Well, a couple of follow-ups here. One of them is the question of whether one of them wanted to be there anymore or not, or, behind the scenes, some trust factor has already been broken. And, Sauce Gardner is that candidate, even though he mentioned today in Indianapolis that that's not the case. But I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind translating this from general manager speak into English, Joe. Darren Muji had this to say about the Sauce contract that they just signed him to in July, and then traded him just a little over 100 days later. Hit it, please, if you don't mind.
The process for doing that contract is a very detailed one where, credit to Nick Sabella, we had a lot of discussion going through that contract process and some of the details we had to have in that contract, because you never know how the future is going to unfold, and we always wanted to be in a position to potentially trade these contracts. And credit to Nick Sabella, he did a great job on that contract, made that contract still a tradable contract for the case that you get into a situation where the value you think is just too good to pass up. And that happened to be the case here.
So is that something that's just done pro forma for all contracts, or did they okay, yeah, right?
You're a Jets fan. That's a very, very good clip. That's just how you want to hear them thinking about it. See, the Eagles a few years ago they've really only made one really major change from my time there, which is the way they structure the contract and how the cap hits the contracts. I used to try to write them flat, so as the cap went up, that created extra room for us. Now they're trying to maximize the number of players they can fit each year, so they postpone the cap charges. And there's arguments for both of those things, and I think they're actually doing the right thing for where we are relative to the cap. So that's exactly like, we talk about Miami. Miami is stuck with Tua unless they make just a massive sacrifice for probably a year or two. So if you're doing what he just described, that's the right way to do it. Keep your flexibility. And then if something like this comes up and you feel like it's the right value, you can do it. There's a lot of teams, if they did a contract out recently, either wouldn't or couldn't make the next move. So I applaud the way he's thinking. That's smart thinking. That's strategic thinking. It's thinking beyond the moment. So I'd be encouraged if I was a Jets fan and heard somebody describing it like that. That's exactly what he should be saying. And there's a lot of general managers in the league that wouldn't be saying that.
Well, the only reason why I'm also bringing it up is, and I'm not trying to kick a hornet's nest here, but there are Jet fans, including some very young ones whose videos went viral, who fell in love with Sauce Gardner, and they're wondering why he had to go after you just re-signed him, and he's going to be there forever. And then you hear, well, when we did the contract, we wanted to make sure there was language in there that we could trade him as soon as possible if the situation came up. Why would you? Listen, I understand due diligence, but unless there was any smoke that was already happening there, did they do that for Garrett Wilson would be a follow-up? You know what I mean? Like, what's up with that, Joe? And that's why I'm trying to see if am I onto something here, or I just need to move on? I mean,
listen, I think what it probably reflects is there was some difference of opinion about whether to do that extension or not. And then hopefully there's an organizational philosophy that we're going to manage our cap, at least until we're good and trying to get from good to great. We're going to manage our cap and maintain flexibility as much as we can, which I think a lot of the teams that are kind of copying the Eagles model are doing it too early. It's something that's worth considering doing. When you get to the point where you have a chance to be really good, compete, advance in the playoffs, it's not something that, in my opinion, makes sense when you're winning 3, 5, 7 games a year, and the path to getting beyond that, probably because you don't have a quarterback, is hard to see at the moment. So the thinking that, they did this well, now they get a quarterback, it happens sometimes, but most of the time the teams that get the first or second pick need a quarterback. So accumulating assets to trade with them occasionally works, but usually you got to be the one that was bad enough to get the first or second pick, third pick in the draft. Usually there's not more than 2 quarterbacks in the draft, and plenty of times we get 2 drafted, but there's only 1. So you really got to be in the first or second pick to feel confident that history says I'm likely to pick a quarterback here that's going to be good. But I'm assuming that he's speaking in generalities, and at least until they get good, I think that's much smarter than the way most teams are thinking about doing contracts right now. And he understands the value of maintaining the flexibility. This is highly unusual. Hopefully this doesn't happen very often, but to at least be preparing for the possibility to do it by maximizing the flexibility your cap and your contracts are structured is smart. He's doing that. That's a very good thing to be doing. He should stick with that for now.
Joe Banner here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, so there's 3 teams that I'm interested in hearing about your opinion about where they are and how they can move forward. And let's start with the Dolphins. You just referred to them, Joe, and I believe you are there in the Sunshine State. What do you think their options are now? They bounced Chris Greer before the trade deadline. They trade Jalen Phillips away. Jalen Waddle is still there. You mentioned to his contract. There's a coach who's still under contract. We don't know what the future. Walk me through, read me the tea leaves of what you think the Dolphins have done and what their options are moving forward here.
I'm concerned if somebody's rooting for them. Listen, the owner really has one job. They can do more. They can be helpful in many areas, but they really have one job. They have to succeed from a fan perspective, because all the fan really cares about is how many games you're going to win. And that is, he has to get 2 to 3 hires right. Depending upon your structure, you have to have a general manager, head coach, and I think ideally a team president, all of whom are really good at their job, and then you will be able to compete with the best teams in the league. It's interesting to me because Steve Ross, I know reasonably well. He's a nice guy. He's a very smart guy. He's been very successful. But he has not mastered the ability to hire well at the top of his organization now, going back from the time that he became the owner of the team. And that's the reason they haven't done better. And, you know, I know Greer, he's a good guy. He's a hard worker, but he got 9 years. We talk about some situations with people too impatient. I don't know how you justified all 9 years of that. There were a lot of mistakes made during that time, including hiring of coaches. I think I was with Mike briefly. We overlapped in Cleveland. The reputation he has as being an offensive mind is well-deserved. I mean, I've been with Andy Reid. I've been with John Gruden. I've been with, names that are probably less relevant today. Sean Payton, a lot of the coaches that are top offensive minds now. He's as good as any of them. So I put him as in the upper echelon of offensive minds. But the job description for a coordinator and a head coach is just totally different. And if you hire a coordinator that doesn't have the abilities that differentiate the good head coaches from the good coordinators, then you're going to be disappointed. So Mike has done I'd say a solid job, but not what you'd be hoping for the day you hired him. And I think it's because some of the qualities he has as head coach, or you need as head coach, aren't the same strengths as he demonstrates when he develops his offense. Part of that should have been working with Chris and having a team building philosophy. From our conversations, to me, you got to dominate the lines of scrimmage. You got to have a good quarterback. Some teams build their team. We got to have good corners and we got to have good wide receivers. That's what the Dolphins have been doing. To me, it's not like you can't succeed that way, but the odds of succeeding under that scenario are just not as high. I mean, we used to estimate that the teams were consistently making the top 8 in the NFL. 75% of them believed in this philosophy where you must dominate the line of scrimmage. And about a quarter of them were building their team around things like weapons and secondary play. So to me, there is no real legitimate argument about what the right team building philosophy for. The Dolphins have not had that ever, as far as I'm concerned. They dabbled in it a little bit here and there, but they never made it like, we're not going to win big until we fix this problem. So I'm worried. It sounds like there's a real chance they keep Mike. I don't really want to take a shot at him because there are elements, what he does. He's in the top group in the league. But as a head coach, he hasn't proven to me he can do all of that. And, they're going to have to find a general manager, in my opinion. If they keep the head coach, it's going to be much harder to find the people there. And, listen, it's not a good roster.
Well, I mean,
so
the Tua contract rests on top of all this. I mean, I understand about the command and control structure, and obviously that's crucial. I would never push back against you, but, you got to get the quarterback right. And what that contract is what, in your estimation? You want to finish that sentence?
I mean, it takes a massively bigger cap hit over 2 years than we've ever seen, even more than what Denver did a couple of years ago. And it leaves you with no quarterback. So where is that? You have no quarterback. You have a head coach I don't think is quite good enough to get you where you're trying to go, and you don't have a general manager. Ideally, you'd have somebody who felt like, I don't think Tua is hopeless. Let's give it a year. We're probably in the early phase of, doing what we did to the Eagles, what the Jets just did. We're probably going to move. By the way, the Jets would have been doing the right thing if they had moved older players that had some value, maybe not as high. So I think they're thinking, again, the right way. But young players that can be a big part of a team in 2 years, 3 years, I would not move. The Dolphins don't even have any of those people to talk about moving. They have some people that maybe get something in the middle. I mean, I saw people talking about people they could get third-round picks for that they'd be lucky if they got a 5th or 6th-round pick for. I mean, Waddle, in my mind, is the only person they could have traded. And even there, the numbers are grossly exaggerated. But he would have real value in the trade market. They decided not to do that. So I don't know what they're doing. They're not acknowledging we're in a really bad place. We got to kind of tear down the house and rebuild it. And they're not doing anything proactive that makes you think in any short period of time they can get to be really competitive, especially now that it looks like the Patriots are going to be good again for a long time. I think Buffalo's going to be good for a long time. Maybe the Jets can get there, and then you got Miami. They've got a long way to go to even have a chance to compete to win their division.
Joe Banner here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, let's talk about the Eagles. where Howie did trade for Jalen Phillips, Jair Alexander, Michael Carter, and other teams in this mix. I mean, you saw the Colts get aggressive, and you saw Philadelphia do the usual thing. Howie did his usual thing. We all here say that if we're a general manager and we see a 215 number, we're just not answering it. You know what I mean? Like that's the way we've been saying that he's the Obi-Wan Kenobi of this sport, making you believe that draft picks you can part with them. So the bottom line is why do you think the Eagles did what they did and other teams didn't? Is there a philosophy here that you can sort of cookie cutter here for us, Joe?
Well, I don't understand why there was no competing team that wouldn't offer the same third-round pick, which is almost certainly going to be higher than the Eagles, to get this player, even on a half-a-season basis. You got to remember, the Eagles' philosophy for a long time is they either, which is the case here, they already had accumulated an extra third-round pick in case they needed the flexibility. And if they didn't have one, I'm going to tell you, they would have just taken their first-round pick, traded back 4 spots. They know the math. Let's say you have the 20th pick or the 24th pick. Mm-hmm. The percentage of times you'll hit on the picks is exactly the same. So he could take, and just making up a number, obviously the 20th pick, trade up for the 24th pick, he's replaced the third-round pick. So he got the player for nothing, because the odds of the hitting on the same pick in the first round at 20 or 24 or 26 and 30 is the same. I don't know why every team in the league doesn't know that and manage their team as if that's just a fact. But as your question indicated, most teams don't. But it was a good example, though. The Eagles have 6 good defensive linemen. They're used to having 8 or 9. So they're putting a defensive pass rusher as a need when nobody else in the league would look at their roster and think it's a need. So that's where it starts. They have a team-building philosophy that they're committed to. And I believe, they've been winning for 30 years. The people that came through to Philadelphia, like the Sean McDermott's, John Harbaugh, Sean Payton's, Andy Reid's, are all practicing a version of the same team-building philosophy. And guess what? I just rattled off probably 5 of the best 7 or 8 teams in the whole league. So that's why I say, to me, there is no debate any longer about what's the right team-building philosophy, where you are in the development and all that kind of stuff. So the Eagles did what they do. And in that particular specific example, now, the 2 corners they got is another example of what they historically done. Our philosophy was, if we get a clear-cut solution to a problem on something that's important, let's go get it. If we don't, and we literally used to use this phrase, let's throw a whole bunch of darts at it that at least one has a chance to come through. So he acquires 2 corners that aren't even really playing much for 2 teams that have won 3 games or less so far this season. But there is reason to think maybe. And, they acquired somebody earlier in the year, and they did some things in the offseason. So I know what he's doing. He's sitting there going, I'm looking at the rosters up there. I'm looking who's available for trade. I'm looking at what I'm willing or hoping to have to not give up, like first or second round picks. I think I'm better off just throwing a whole bunch of darts at this problem and hoping. I mean, if Alexander plays anything like he did, 2 or 3 years ago, which may not be in the cards, but he's feeling like, if I got 4 of the people that could be him, maybe just one of them will at least come through for just, 8, 10, 12 games, depending on how long they play in the postseason. So to me, it's just very basic common sense, and it is a mystery why more teams aren't copying some of the elements. I mean, the whole league knew Jalen Phillips was available. I mean, San Francisco didn't think it was worth maybe a third-round pick. That's probably a fairly late third-round pick, but much higher than the Eagles. Dallas, they were obviously trying to improve their pass rush. They didn't think he's worth a third-round pick, maybe because they traded the other players who, to me, are good pickups, but they don't really enhance dramatically their pass rush, which, again, is the key. So, the Eagles are just consistently smart. Although, Howie, it's funny to me, I say this to you because, I think you probably witnessed the same thing. For the first 8 years, Howie was the general manager. He made a lot of moves, some very good, some not so good. But no matter what he did, he was criticized for it. He was just totally demonized, especially in the Philadelphia market. Now he's kind of flipped the script, which I can't think of anybody else who's ever done that, to where he gets the benefit of the doubt on every move, he makes. And he's earned that. But he also was over-criticized the first group of years when everybody was looking at the moves he was making, because they weren't winning Super Bowls. They weren't advancing even that deep in the playoffs. And instead of being able to, isolate the moves and make a fair judgment of him, they just lumped him, with a kind of a non-football guy label, and didn't recognize it. It was actually proven. Like, I was flabbergasted when Jeff kind of demoted him when Chip was there, because it was obvious to me, at least, and I thought others, that, he had talent. Now, would he become the best general manager of the league? That's a projection and a hope. You can't know that. But it seemed like it was possible. He's got the guts. He's got the fearlessness. He has the ability to evaluate. He's got a strong team-building philosophy. So I have no answer to why the rest of the league seems to be sleeping on some things. I mean, he acquired Darius Slay for, I think it was either the third or fourth pick, 5 years ago, and he helped them get to 2 Super Bowls. Where was everybody when that happened? It wasn't that hard to figure that Darius Slay was worth the 3rd or 4th round pick. I mean, their general managers aren't on the phone until they read in the paper that so-and-so may be available. Howie's talking to 31 teams all the time. So he's never surprised by something's coming up. He has a pretty good idea himself. He's not designating all of that. He may designate some of that, but he is constantly has a feel for what's coming up and what's possible.
I love it. I only have 2 minutes left, and I know this is more than a 2-minute answer, Joe, but what do you think the Browns are up to?
Oh, God. It's very hard to understand. Listen, at this point, I think they try and end up with as high a pick as they can. It doesn't make any sense to me trading Pritchard and Flacco. And, I know that the Bengals were upset that they traded him in the division, but why wouldn't they? That means they lose another game when they play them. They can't get the benefit of his talent versus the young guys. I mean, they're doing the right thing and seeing if either the young quarterbacks have what it could take or they just have to pick somebody this year. I don't think either of them have what it takes, in my opinion, by the way. I know there's a lot of talk about Sanders. And listen, they could lose all 5 of their offensive linemen at the end of the season or have decided they're not good enough. And they just had a draft that, at least in Cleveland, was covered as a great draft without picking one offensive lineman, even at the end of the draft, to possibly develop. I just don't understand. I mean, that's just a way off-base team-building philosophy. So, I mean, I think Stefanski is actually a good coach. I don't think he's a great coach. I think he's a good coach, but he's had 6 years now. I think Andrew Berry's a smart, hardworking, good guy. But I think he's had a fair chance to really demonstrate that they can build a roster that, if they fix the quarterback problem, can go a long way. I don't think they're there yet either. I think the defense is a BB+. I don't think it's an A either. But it's a very good defense. It's in the top, maybe third of the defenses in the league. So I don't know. To me, they got to get back to basics. They got to make some front office changes. They got to get to the point where they can dominate those lines, and hopefully they got a high enough pick that one of the quarterbacks that's there is their answer.
Joe Banner, I love chatting with you, man. You make me smarter. You make all of us smarter. You just spit what's in your heart and your mind, and we appreciate you sharing it with us. Really appreciate it. Let's do this again soon again.
I appreciate you saying that. I'm available anytime you need me.
Love it. Ladies and gentlemen, longtime executive in the National Football League who's been there, done that, and knows all about it. Joe Banner right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.